Hi, I'm Dex Gelfand. I'm going to talk with you about presence, what presence really is, and what it isn't, and in a related subject, Scientology's training routines, or TRs, as examples of presence and the opposites of presence. Presence means to have and be part of and be with and be all that is present. It doesn't mean to maintain or impose any attitude outwardly towards anything else. It doesn't mean to maintain a separateness. It doesn't mean to be unaccepting of anything in the environment. And it doesn't mean to maintain anything or hold anything in place. It means to be and have along with all that is. Totally accepting. There's no effort involved in this. It is a very spiritual undertaking. Spiritually, as I see it, we are all part of a collective consciousness, and in a all-encompassing spiritual perspective, all is here, all is now, and we are an ocean of us. Doesn't mean we don't have individuality, but to be more spiritually whole and connected, there is acceptance. There is a collectiveness that is welcomed without pushing or pulling or imposing anything. Presence is being part of, being all, being present, having all that's present. There's no conflict, there's no distancing from, there's no us and them, no in and out. It's just being all here, accepting. Now, it's come to mind very recently for me in terms of Scientology's training routine drills. The first thing to understand, I guess, to just have an inkling to begin with of what I'm talking about. In Scientology, what they call TRs or training routines, the most basic of these, what's called OT, Operating Thetan 0. Thetan is Scientology's word for spirit or soul. An operating Thetan is meant to suggest existing and functioning as a spiritual being thereby able to create or experience anything in full realization of one's spirituality. So that's operating Thetan is the idea there. For Scientology may also indoctrinate in and add in some other connotations along with these, which are not relevant for our purposes at the moment. Anyway, these drills, Training Routine 0 and Operating Thetan, OT, Training Routine 0, basically go like this. You sit across from another person who's a few feet away. The first one, OT TR 0, eyes closed. And depending on how you interpret the instructions, in any case, you're sitting there, eyes closed, along with the other person sitting eyes closed in front of you. Now, in Scientology, they use the word confronting. This is a confronting drill. And that's why it goes south so easily for so many people, because confronting implies confrontation. It implies opposition. It implies one side trying to win out against the other in some way. So at the same time, the instructions also say to be there comfortably. But as you can see, there's a conflict in these ideas of confronting and simply being there comfortably. TR0, as opposed to OTTR0, is done with eyes open. And the way these are conducted in Scientology, a person is supposed to sit there facing the other person and not have or display any reactions, and to be motionless. And it's being supervised, and the supervisor or coach, if they detect any reactions of any kind, will say, flunk, you blinked, flunk, you twitched, flunk, you moved. That's largely where it goes astray, because when somebody's telling you flunk, you're doing it wrong, start again. More and more, a person is put in the role and position of trying not to be flunked, trying to pass. And trying itself has no place in presence. Trying is effort. And so people doing these drills, very frequently, what it's indoctrinating them to do is to suppress any feelings or reactions, and instead put effort into maintaining a projected presence of being unmoved, inexpressive, and sort of, how can I say it, projecting that outward towards the other person. So there's a lot of doing things other than being there comfortably going on. In some cases, and I've helped, let's say, a client or two who fell into this abyss. In doing this, a lot of feelings and reactions can come up, being that close to another person. It can trigger all kinds of insecurities, moments of shock, all kinds of very disturbing and uncomfortable feelings. And basically, this drill can go one way or the other. If it happens to be supervised well, in the spirit of being there comfortably, in the spirit of presence, sometimes people have revelations. People recognize a new ability to be there comfortably and to have presence. But there's so much missing even in saying that, in doing these drills. It really doesn't give the concept of presence. Be there comfortably. Where's there? You see, presence is having all that is present, allowing it, having it. If you're reacting in any way, you're not allowing it and having it. If you're projecting any attitude, you're trying to maintain an attitude of impassiveness so you won't be flunked, so you can complete and get out of doing this drill, which can become so arduous under that pressure. Flunk. Tens of thousands of us know what this is like. It's quite unpleasant. And sometimes the result can be a person who is indoctrinated in suppressing their sensitivities and suppressing their feelings and putting a lot of energy and effort into presenting a facade, which is no way to live, but it is sort of the identity of a Scientologist, as this is a very basic drill, an indoctrination into Scientology. The TRs have further steps, TR1, TR2, TR3, and these go into how to execute an instruction, or as they call it, a command or a question to the person receiving counseling in a Scientology counseling session. And these drills include how to naturally convey something or make it sound natural when it's very unnatural. That, to me, is not being present. There's a drill in acknowledging the person receiving the counseling, the point being to get them to stop speaking and feel acknowledged. Now, an actual effective counseling in which there is the necessary connection, intimacy between counselor and the person being counseled. These things are felt. The Scientology TRs are sort of how to synthesize these things. And I don't think it's ever a good practice to be indoctrinated and skilled into getting the other person to stop talking, which is the essence of TR2 in Scientology. And then there were drills for their TR3 and TR4, which are about when you give an instruction or a question as the counselor to the person receiving the counseling, and their response doesn't seem like an answer to your question or instruction, to simply tell them, I'm going to repeat what I asked. I'm going to ask you that question again. I'll repeat the command. I'll repeat the question, which is to say to the person receiving the counseling, flunk, you failed to answer the question. And then there's TR4, which is when the person receiving the counseling gives a response or brings up a subject that seems unrelated to what was asked for, to return them back to giving something that's a direct and obvious answer to the question. Well, here's what's missing in that. The purpose of asking a question or giving an instruction in a counseling session should not be to receive an answer from them that answers that question. A valid instruction or question in a counseling session brings up in the person's mind who's being counseled, it brings things to the forefront for them to be able to process. How or when they answer your question is not so relevant. And if you are present with that person receiving the counseling, you're with them, then you understand that they understand. And you would understand that any response from them, if you allow them to continue, will answer the question, but more importantly, it will bring about their processing what they need to process, assuming it's a valid and worthwhile and relevant question, which in Scientology, perhaps more frequently than not, is actually not the case. And maybe that's why there's all this push and force in getting the Scientology counselor's question answered. It shouldn't be tough. It should be easy. If that question is relevant, then it brings that person, in that person's mind, what they need to process, and it's all good. But this focus on, you didn't give me what seems like an answer to the question. Most of the time, if the counselor would just shut up, allow the person to keep processing, they will resolve the subject at hand. See, while Scientology counselors are trained in acknowledging the person being counseled so that they stop talking, it's the Scientology counselor who needs to be a lot better at stopping talking and allowing the person receiving the counseling to process what they're processing. I came to recognize very easily quite a while ago, and I'm speaking from a Scientology background that I evolved out of as I observed what was happening, as opposed to what I was trained to think was happening, that when you ask a person a valid and relevant question in a counseling session, and they're not looking right at you, they're looking away, whether they're speaking or not, or whether they said they've finished with that question or not. If they're looking away, there's processing going on. They're thinking, things are coming to mind. That's why they're not looking at you yet. They're still in process. And when they've completed the process and digested and processed whatever material came to mind, that's when he or she would look at you as the counselor, as if to say, what's next? So Scientology counselors are not at all knowledgeable or trained in this fact. If too many seconds go by without a response, they repeat their question, thus interrupting the processing cycle that is taking place within the person. And I've had some clients who, in doing the TRs, the OT, TR0, and the TR0, sitting there silently, facing the other person, eyes open or eyes closed, it triggered some very heavy things for them. And they really had to get very rigid, apply a lot of internal force and energy to get through that drill to be passed so they could get out of that chair and be done with it, out of the pressure of not blinking and not showing any reactions. And what this does is it really amplifies the undesirable fear and pain and anxiety within the person. The more they have to resist that feeling and hold it down, that actually makes it tougher and stronger. And I've had a client or two who, for a long time afterward, was quite in trauma until it surfaced in sessions with me, and we were able to process not merely what occurred in the TRs, but what was triggered and the underlying material. Now, had the instructions been as in the spirit of the original meditation techniques that Scientology was actually derived from, the Scientology TRs were derived from around 1955 or 1956, which L. Ron Hubbard's son, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., became familiar with, and he's the one who brought this into the Scientology fold. The spirit of that is to simply be present, have all that is present, have the other person's presence, not be resisting it in any way. And you sit there and do that. And if feelings arise, you notice those feelings. You allow them to process. You don't try to pretend you're not having a reaction. You notice the reaction. You relax everything and allow the feelings to flow through you, process, and digest. You wouldn't be concerned about holding your eyes and your body still, appearing impassive and unaffected, because that's a drill in bottling up and putting force to suppress the feelings that actually are begging to be processed and felt and experienced so that you can have the relief that you need. This is presence. And so Scientology TRs sometimes are emphasized, what's emphasized is that be there comfortably. Sometimes it works, and some people can say that it was a great experience and helped them. But from what I've seen and experienced far more often, it was indoctrination in how to suppress yourself and your actual feelings and how to pour energy into maintaining a facade, a winning attitude of some kind. And that is not how to become whole as a spiritual being. To become whole and happy and successful in your passions, well, that's a lot more about being who you are and feeling what you feel and digesting what you need to digest and having your feelings instead of fighting your feelings or resisting them. It's the difference between being present and effortless and being trapped in a wrestling match with yourself, putting a lot of energy and force into a facade, into presenting a projection, an identity, an attitude, which I don't think is the way we really want to have to live. Presence is everything. So those of you who may have been experienced in drilling Scientology training routines, I think this will explain a lot for you. The original spirit of the original meditation technique is a beautiful thing. Scientology, it became a form of indoctrination so that Scientologists can go forth and present the facade that will make other people admire and be interested in Scientology and say, boy, I want to be like that. But a lot of times it can also come across as strange and odd and phony and scary. In any case, presence does not involve confrontation. It involves acceptance, openness, connection. It doesn't involve maintaining a separateness or maintaining a sense of feeling of disconnection from the environment or unacceptance of the environment or anything or anyone that is present. And that's presence as opposed to Scientology TRS.